Lilithe abdomen rig. Lilithe is a character I have on sale on Gumroad, so if you want to have the character for reference while we're talking about this, go buy her there and come back here and watch. Otherwise, let's go through really quickly what this looks like. First, go watch the Dikko series, rigging series, the spine episode. That's D-I-K-K-O, Dikko. He'll show you how to set up the spine rig as a basic spine rig. And the additions we want to that are, first of all, we want to have some ribs that are a child of the chest, or the bone that goes from this red area here up to her neck. In my rig, that's called the chest. In the chest, if we change its scale, we want her ribs to show more or less. This is going way beyond what is natural, so just to give you an idea, as she breathes in like that, you see her ribs more. As she breathes out, you see her ribs less. The way to do that is just you put you model her ribs really strongly, and then you add a constraint on her body to be rib smooth right here. So this will have a factor that's based on the scale of her rib, or of her chest bone here. And so we'll go into that in more detail in a second. So you want that. You want to have two bones that are children of her ribs. So if you move her ribs, you can see the top moves. And these bones stretch to the hip bone. So let's take a look at that. There's a stretch to target, goes to her hip bone. The hip bone is at the front of her hip. That has a constraint, but if you want to know more about that, go watch the thigh tutorial that I made and you'll understand what that constraint is. That is all that you need to get a convincing midsection. So now let's go into, well, if you're a rigging guru, that should be enough to get you to the point where you can do some amazing things. So go do it. But if you're not a rigging guru, you want a little bit more detail, then stick around and let's take a look at what's going on here. So the first thing is my rig is probably a little different than others. There is no FK, I have only IK, and so one of the things is you grab this bone here to move her top. And so we need to grab that bone to move her top so that we can see what happens to her midsection. Let's, I don't know, let's look at her midsection from sort of this angle. So if I move her forward, her stomach kind of goes forward. We probably want to take this too, and let's just do that. There we go. So as she moves forward, her elbow gets in the way and we can't see what's going on. So let's go over here instead. As she moves forward, her stomach muscles and the fat kind of bunch up a little bit and stick out there. If you move her too far forward, it looks pretty bad. She can only really anatomically bend about this far forward. If you're thinking like, but humans can bend further forward, well, that's because they bend at the waist. And right now we're only bending the very, like her midsection. So this would be about where you would want to stop. And if you do go further, you can see the deforms start getting a little weird. So you want to stop at an anatomically correct place. And then if you do, then the main thing that's making that this central area right here look good is these two abdomen bones, which I'm calling just rib to hip stretch. That is the main thing that makes that happen there. The rest of this area deforms pretty much, well, I guess there's a little bit of the ribs, like these ribs, as you can see, they kind of follow the actual form of her ribs. Those catch the weight there. If you're using weight painting, you can just grab her chest bone and have painted out to her ribs. I use actual rib bones for that, which are children of the chest. And so you can kind of think of these as being extending the weight out from the chest into her ribs, except for the fact that I can then grab this one bone and move her ribs around. And that becomes useful if I want to scale them up or down, or move them in and out, etc. Okay, so let's look at the breathing thing, which I mentioned. So the way to do that is you model her with very strong ribs. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. If I uncheck this rib smooth, this is what her ribs look like in the straight up model, which is clearly too much, right? Like you wouldn't want your ribs on your model to look like that, but you model them like that, and then you just put this smooth modifier on her mesh, and that'll smooth it out. Then all you do is hook up a driver to the factor, and the driver is, I just take the average scale of her chest bone, and then I multiply it by this crazy formula here, so 4.2, 28 minus 4 times 26.2. Basically what this does is set it up so that when her chest bone is not scaled at all, there's still some smoothing factor here. So it's still doing a 1.8 smoothing factor even though her chest isn't scaled at all. If I scale her chest up, it smooths less. If I scale her chest down, it smooths more. And so what ends up happening then is as she breathes in, you see her ribs a little more. As she breathes out, you see them less. And so that is just what's going on there. Nothing too special, but you will need to do a little bit of, ribs modeling and a little bit of weight painting there, I guess is the other thing. If you look here, you'll see the vertex group is 0, 0 ribs, right? Okay, well, what does that look like? Let's pull it up. Ribs. So this is weight paint. That is the weight painting. So it's just the area of her ribs. Like, so that smoothing will only affect this area. That way you don't like lose the definition in her elbows or somewhere else where you might want to have definition. So here that only affects her rib area, and that's what gives you that effect. Okay, I think we've belabored that point. Let's go down now to the abdomen muscles, but in this case it's a bone. It's a blender bone. So all that is just a stretch to target. We have, looks like relatively vanilla settings here, except I've, for whatever reason, found that not maintaining the volume looks best here. If you maintain the volume, it feels like she gets a little bit too, it ends up squeezing things out too much. The way I've modeled her mesh is I have a little bit of in and out going here, so you can see it kind of goes in on her ribs, it comes out on her stomach, it goes in just above her hip, and then comes back out on her hip. All this in and out is going to translate to some nice deforms when she starts bending forward. So let's take a look at that. So as she comes forward, you can see that out section starts turning into a bulge of her stomach, and so that actually ends up looking relatively pleasing. There's it looks pretty nice from a lot of different angles. I'm really happy with that. Glad I did it. If you want even more, then just make sure you model more in and out. It can be very subtle in and out on the unposed mesh as she bends forward, and as this all scrunches up and Blender starts trying to figure out what to do with all that geometry, it looks like in general, the things sticking out go out more, the things sticking in go in more. So it'll probably end up being a nice looking deform, but for now I've only got that one fat roll, and that seems to make me happy and makes her look good. The other thing is you've got this hip bone, and this is just for that, well, in the purpose of this rig, it's only for this to stretch to. It does have a constraint here. If you want to understand that constraint, go watch the hip tutorial, and that'll show you what's going on there. All these other bones are coming from the Dikko rig. I changed them slightly, like this bone here. As you can see, it has a constraint that does a damped track to the control in her neck. That's just so that I don't have to do as much work when I'm moving her upper body. You see, as I move her upper body, that red bone in her hips is moving along with. That it ends up just making it so I don't have to counter animate as much. I put her in some pose. This thing basically deals with the deforms properly. This bone here just does from her waist down. So this bone is very much, or this control, I suppose, is very much based off of the Dikko rig. So if you did the Dikko rig, this probably already does what you want it to do. And I believe I have now covered all the bones. Yep, that is everything. I guess this bone here is just part of her spine. Again, there's nothing special about this outside of, it just is part of the rig, and probably most of the time I don't even touch that bone. That is just, like, if something's really wrong with her midsection, I can't figure out why, sometimes this bone will be useful for doing that, but yeah, you don't have to play with that. And there you go. I guess that is everything I can think to say about her midsection. So I guess for filling out the time, because why not, let's fill out the time, I'll go view a few poses, and we can look at what does her midsection look like. Nothing special there. Here she's leaning back a bit, and that flattens out her stomach and pulls back the abdomen a bit. Here's where she's running and leaning forward, therefore you see that kind of bulge in her stomach area that comes forward because of that. Here again, she's kind of leaning back. You end up with some flatness in the stomach. Here again, leaning forward, you get that nice pulling forward here. This I see happening on real women all the time. It wasn't actually something I did on purpose, but it does seem to be, like I say, a real effect. Sometimes the fat kind of pulls up towards the belly button, so it kind of comes off in a, what would you call it, like an A shape. This looks natural to me. I haven't, like I say, I didn't model it. I didn't follow any references when I did this, so it may actually be incorrect, but it looks good to my eye. And I think really we've kind of seen all the different poses that do something with her midsection. Here it looks like I've actually put her in a pose that's not completely anatomically correct. Like this is really twisted up around in here, but I just did it because it looks good from the camera angle. It's like not necessarily required that she look like that, right? You can take this maybe and bend it around, fix it up, or take her midsection, twist it, and get it back into a normal so it doesn't look so strange. But I like the way it looked, and so, you know, this is what we ended up with. All right, I think with that, I'm gonna, well, I guess I should take a look at this. So I was mentioning earlier that she wasn't bending far enough forward. Here, actually, her back is somewhat even straighter. Like, it could actually bend down about like this and still be anatomically correct. All the bending is coming from her hips and legs. So that's, if you get the character and you're trying to pose her in something where her chest is close to her knees, just remember a lot of that mobility comes from the hips and legs, not so much from her upper body. Her upper body shouldn't need to be bent very much to get into that pose. All right, thanks for watching. Good luck rigging.